started. Okay. So we have a quorum. Should we still? Get started. We're going to switch the agenda around a little bit today, take some of the reports in the early part of the meeting, and then have the vote, the votes on the various variance items toward the end of the meeting. First thing we're going to do is approve the minutes of October 9th. Someone wants to move that? Is there a second? Any questions, comments, revisions proposed? No, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The minutes carry. Approved. We were going to address PREA today. We're not going to do that today. Commissioner Braun is not able to attend today's meeting and has requested that we table that until January, which we are certainly doing. In October, the board passed a resolution calling for a corrective action regarding the board's sexual abuse standards. The board has found that the department is out of compliance with portions of the minimum standards 5-30 and 5-40. The board's resolution laid out actions for the department to take in order to cure these violations, including the submission of a corrective action plan by November 8th. The department did not submit that plan and also did not provide any additional information about their efforts to come into compliance with 5-30 and 5-40. As I noted earlier, since Commissioner Braun is not here today, we will take up the discussion of the resolution and the corrective action plan at the meeting in January 2019. I think now what we'll do, as I noted earlier, we have 3 variants scheduled for votes today, and that one is a variance to allow the department to modify the visiting schedule on Thanksgiving in order to conduct visitations on a day schedule rather than an evening schedule. There is also a variance renewal request to allow them to house young adults, 18 to 21-year-olds, in the ESH. And then finally, there's a variance request to allow the department to reduce out-of-cell time to a minimum of 10 hours per day in the secure unit, and to allow alternative access to legal services and materials in that unit. As we customarily do, because of these votes, we'll have a public comment period now on those 3 variance items. We will ask the speakers to limit their talk to 3 minutes, and also to limit their comments specifically to these variance requests. We have 4 speakers. In addition, we'll have another public comment period at the end of the meeting, just for general public comments. The first speaker is Jennifer Parrish.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Parrish. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Advocacy at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project and a member of the Jails Action Coalition. Once again, I encourage you to reject these variances. The board should not continue to allow restraint desks to be used in the ESH where people are shackled for the entirety of the time that they're out of the cells. It's clear that the department is not looking for other alternatives in their evaluation that they submitted to you. They did not discuss plans for changing the way that restraint desks are used or how these units are operated. One of my concerns about all of the reporting that's posted on the board's website from the Department of Correction is that they never mention restraint desk at all. They talk about level 1 and they talk about level 2, and we know what those levels are if we attend the board meeting, but they never explicitly mention restraint desk. Also, in their audit reports where they talk about the time out of cell that people spend, they don't indicate that the time out of cell is spent in restraint desk. I think the board should require them to report on the number of hours that each person spends in a restraint desk. Another reason that the board should reject this variance is that the department is clearly not complying with one of the conditions that's been set, and that is requiring 5 hours of programming. This is clear from the audits that 5 hours of programming is rarely even offered, and when it is, at times, the young adults who are not in the tier where it's being offered can't even access it. That should be of great concern to the board. In addition, in the secure units, none of the individuals were allowed out for 10 hours a day, as the board requires. And in addition, in the secure unit, programming was very limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Next speaker is Danielle Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Cephas and board members. My name is Danielle Gerard. I'm a staff attorney with Children's Rights. We've testified before you before. We are requesting that the Board of Correction deny the current variance requests. Instead, we urge the board to require the department to comply with existing minimum standards. The ESH variance for 18 to 21-year-olds has been extended by the board 5 times since it was first approved. But just as punitive segregation is harmful and inappropriate for adolescents and young adults, placement in ESH is also harmful and inappropriate. Young adults placed in ESH have few opportunities to rebuild or build enduring relationships with family and caring adults. They're cut off from beneficial contacts, including the few existing normalizing activities available in detention. This flies in the face of social science and neurological research that guide best practices for working with older youth. Although we are heartened by some of the progress the department seems to have made, the September 2018 update shows the median number of days spent in ESH is 85, nearly 3 months. Some youth spend over a year in ESH, and overall initial placements in ESH have increased. The update does not address many of the concerns raised in the board's July 2017 report, such as the use of restraint desks in ESH, visitation restrictions for young adults, access to mental health services, physical conditions of recreation space, and more. We commend the department's discontinuance over the past year of the use of restraint desks in the secure unit, and we would like to know the status of the use of restraint desks in ESH. In addition, the September 2018 update does not include a plan regarding how the department will comply with the 3-year-old minimum standard that mandates that inmates ages 18 through 21 shall be excluded from ESH placement. Regarding the lock-in and access to courts variance renewals that have been approved 8 times, young adults on the secure unit can spend 14 hours in their cells. This is too long for adults and certainly too long for young adults. In addition, by not allowing the young adults in the secure unit to leave to go to the law library, the department confines them to the unit itself, even when they are on lockout. We respectfully request the board address the following questions. Does the department plan to exclude inmates 18 through 21 from ESH in accordance with minimum standards? When will the department address the other concerns raised in the board's July 2017 report on ESH, particularly regarding restraint desks? And when will the department comply with existing minimum standards for the secure unit? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elias Hussamadin. Oh, next speaker is Al Craig.
Good morning. She's right. You did this 5 times or 6 times. I lost count. but this is nonsense, what she's talking about. What do you do to somebody who cuts and slash another inmate? Why don't you ever advocate for the inmates that's getting hurt? It's like a joke to me that they come up here all the time citing these rules, and they make our job so difficult to protect the inmates who just happen to come through, whether they're guilty or not, and just want to go home safe. They all talking about what you left out of the report. They always leave that out. They always leave the fact that most of the people that get hurt are other inmates. And they don't want to see they vilify when we get hurt, we're supposed to get hurt. That's what everybody in the room seems to believe. But the other inmates, they never mention. It's like, shh, I'm going to get up here and I'm going to talk about what's omitted from a report. But what do you do when somebody hurts one of the people that you say you advocate for? You never talk about that. And that's going to show you how phony and fraudulent you are. It's all about $1 to you. You come up here all the time and you omit that. Ridiculous. And it's like, I don't believe, like, even you, Dr. Cohen, got to understand that people are getting hurt. These guys are not in there because they spit or splash normally. They in there because they're violent. And they continue to stay in there because they have a propensity for violence. And they omit that all the time. They come up here and it's fraudulent. It's disingenuous. And let me tell you another thing. I wish people would stop this. Like, you have so much compassion for these young black and Latino men who are, that's bull crap. I really can't. It's bull crap, because you know what? When they're in the streets, you're keeping your head straight, you're not speaking. It's just that when they come out of themselves, you all of a sudden got so much compassion for them, and you still don't got compassion for the victim. Where are the victims' rights groups? Where are they? Why don't they get up here and talk about people getting hurt? Nobody talks about this. And you're disingenuous, you're fraudulent, fake, you're frauds. You're nothing but frauds. Your compassion is not there. You're not serious. One more second. How many other ways I can say you're fake, fraudulent, and a fraud? You don't care about inmates. You don't care about safety. You're ignorant to the fact you're highly educated people. There's something nice to talk about at these little events, and you keep getting a paycheck because of it. So let's keep it real. You're not really doing anything. How many more seconds? You're fake, fraudulent, and phony. 9 more seconds. You're fake, fraudulent, and phony. I want to keep emphasizing that. Get up here and talk about the victims of these people. That's what you need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Yeah, we want to go to the reports.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to skip the variances for the moment and come back to those a little bit later. Martha, you want?
So we're going to move down to the DOC update section of the agenda. We are expecting Jackie Sherman to join us shortly. That's why we're moving the votes later in the agenda. For the record, I just want to wish Michelle Ovesey, the General Counsel, to the board a very happy birthday today. She worked all weekend in preparation for this.
Any discussion of that? No?
And we'll
city contracts, birthday should be a holiday.
and we'll move on to a discussion of the settlement with the U.S. Attorney. So on August 20th, 2018, DOC and Health and Hospitals and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York announced an out-of-court settlement regarding compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as the ADA. The U.S. Attorney's investigation found widespread violations of architectural accessibility standards in DOC's jails. They also found that DOC failed to respond in a timely or adequate manner to accommodation requests from people in custody with disabilities. Further, the New York City jails failed to consistently, 1, place people with mobility and visual impairments into accessible housing, 2, fail to consistently provide people with mobility impairments access to appropriate mobility devices, and 3, fail to consistently provide people with hearing impairments with equal access to telecommunication services. We've asked DOC and Health and Hospitals to update the board on the agreement with the U.S. Attorney and its plans for implementing the settlement terms.
So on August 18th, the department did enter into a voluntary, the city did enter into a voluntary compliance agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, which memorializes the DOC's commitment and the city's commitment toward equal treatment of inmates with disabilities, including compliance with the Americans with Disability Act. The voluntary agreement has two main parts. There are architectural and structural changes and abatement work, and second, a commitment to afford inmates with equal access to services, programs, and activities. The architectural work, the scope of the architectural work is limited to facilities where inmates with disabilities are housed, the NYC and the Rose M. Singer Center, and as well public spaces like the central visit areas and the visit areas of each of the facilities. With respect to the structural work, they fall into three different categories. We have some minor work that we are committed to completing within about 9 months. And that kind of work involves items like changing the heights of mirrors, small fixtures, grab bars. We also have another more, a little bit heightened level of work that's not as minor, but we will be handling that internally. That's with our internal FMRD unit, and the type of work that's involved with that level would be steps like insulating pipes, moving structures such as shelves and desks, increasing the length of handrails on ramps. Then we get into the more complicated structural repairs that requires an outside consultant. The kind of work we're talking about here involve building new ramps, changing slopes in certain facility areas, moving toilets, and creating larger turnaround space in some of the bathrooms and water fountains. The deadlines for completing this work we have for our central visits, we expect to be completed by on before May 15, 2021. In our Rose M. Singer Center by May 15, 2022. Our North Infirmary Command by May 2023. And so those are pretty much the schedules for the structural repairs. We are hiring an independent licensed architect to oversee the work that we're doing. So moving on to the equal access to services and programs, we have committed to a person who's going to, a disability rights coordinator and a senior program manager for disabilities who will oversee ensuring that the inmates get the services that they require. We have also have telecommunication plans where DOC plans to install video relay services in the coming months. We are in the process of revising a directive to incorporate all that we agreed to in the agreement, and that's imminent. We're tracking reasonable accommodation requests through our service desk program. We are also have a training plan as well to train our staff. The department is finalizing academy training materials and developing a training video as well. We have been working with our partners CHS on sharing information so that we can ensure that we are considering and granting accommodations as necessary. And those are some of the basic updates that we have to offer.
Any questions, comments, thoughts from the board?
I have a question of health and hospitals, but
I have a question. Heidi, can you talk about, is there any work going to be done on the visit floors where the petitions, it seems like the way that the visit floors with the petitions really doesn't allow for someone who is in a wheelchair to be able to access their visit. Is there any plan on doing anything with that?
Well, whatever visit work we're doing, we have the Department of Justice came by and did an inspection with their experts, and whatever, we have a laundry list of items that we are working towards completing. I'm not sure if that particular issue is noted on that list, but whatever it is that the Department of Justice identified, we are working towards completing on the timeline that I just mentioned. But I can look back into that a little further and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Could you identify for the board what areas of concern DOJ had regarding your practice? And that would include, for example, providing hearing aids, or providing crutches, or providing wheelchairs and accessibility, and what policies you have changed, if you could get copies of those policies to us.
So Health and Hospitals and Correctional Health joined this settlement voluntarily. There was no finding of any wrongdoing with regard to our practices. We joined because we thought it was important to support the Department of Correction, and really I think it's integral to the work of identifying disability is the clinical evaluation that we do. So the things that we've done really span back 2 years. The first thing we did, taking a look at the patient complaint system that we put in place was part of your report. We received, I think, over 2,200 patient complaints in fiscal year 2017. A lot of those are coming from patients themselves within the facilities. Sure. Sure. A lot of those are coming from patients themselves through our 311 process. We track our ADA complaints, ADA-styled complaints that way. So we can report on that, and we know, I think, it's integrated within our system to take those and evaluate them very quickly. The things I think that we have to work on with the Department of Correction really revolve around communication. So at the facility level, we provide, in those areas where we provide wheelchairs, canes, we provide reports to the Department of Correction so that they know who has access to those assistive devices. The people on the ground really resolve, I think, any of the issues with regard to having those devices. We're looking to centralize that as well, so that we have kind of a higher level overview of what's going on in the facilities with regard to individuals who have those devices. We're also required to embark on training for our staff on ADA, which will be something that's a little new for us. I think kind of figuring out what the line is between clinical treatment and where the ADA regulatory and legal requirements come into play is a difficult one, and it's one that we talked about with the Department of Justice and the Law Department and DOC quite a bit about. But nonetheless, we have that requirement, so we are devising a training right now. And then really, I think it's about reporting. So we have to report to the, I think as part of the DOC's report, the city's report to the DOJ on auxiliary devices, which are those assistive devices that we talked about, how many patients have those, and we have to have a good process to resolve issues that patients have with their devices. So if we've given someone a wheelchair and it's broken down, we are in the areas, we do rely on patients to come tell us that something isn't working. So we have policies developed in that area as well.
You have wheelchairs where there was an issue when I in the infirmary, wheelchairs without removable parts, so people could not transfer to their beds. That's some kind of issue that you and DOC have conflict on, I think. How do you resolve those?
So we order specialty wheelchairs. I think we try to get those in as quickly as possible. I'm not sure about the specific conflict that you're identifying, but in those areas, there isn't much restriction in terms of what we can order for an individual who needs a specialty wheelchair.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, but could you just make
The board will be asking for copies of the kind of reports that you described right now.
Okay, we'll move on to the next update item regarding bail reform. In the first 3 months of fiscal year 19, 78% of the approximately 8,250 people in jail were pretrial detainees. These people could not post bail, or they were remanded, detained with no bail set. 76% of these people in DOC custody will be discharged directly back to the community. DOC is responsible for accepting, recording, depositing, and processing bail to release detained people back to the community. Thus, DOC plays an important role in making recent bail reforms work. DOC is also responsible for conducting periodic, non-scheduled audits of bail processing and accounts. In June 2017, the City Council passed 3 bills that changed the department's requirements and process related to its handling of bail. Local Law 123 requires DOC to accept cash bail payments immediately and continuously after an individual is admitted to custody, and requires DOC accept bail in or near all courthouses and online. It further mandates the release of an individual within 3 hours, absent extreme unusual circumstances. Local Law 124 permits DOC delay the transportation of an individual for admission by no less than 4 hours and no more than 12 hours following arraignment in order to facilitate the posting of bail. Local Law 125 requires DOC to give individuals access to their personal property and to assist in making bail. It also requires DOC to provide individuals with a written summary of their bail and options for payment. Lastly, it requires DOC to designate bail facilitators, whose duties are to meet with eligible individuals within 48 hours of admission to explain the process and fees related to posting bail or bond. Bail practices have historically been a BOC concern, particularly when contributing to overcrowding and over-incarceration. Complaints received by BOC, coupled with those reported by the defense bar and bail funds, prompt the board to ask the department to provide an update on implementation of the City Council laws, including the training of staff on these changes and the compliance successes and challenges.
Good morning.
Good
Morning.
So back in April of this year, the department took on a major bail reform in which we implemented the online bail system. We did the BEX program, which allowed inmates to remain in the court who were willing to pay bail and be held until bail could be paid. And we also did the blackout, which allowed inmates for the first time for persons to pay bail for inmates who were in transit. As with Local Law 123, 124, and 125, the department is expected to be in compliance no later than mid-December. We've already established bail facilitators. We're adding TVs to the new admission holding areas in the new admission facilities and the courts, which we have videos that's going to be played to talk about how bail can be paid. We are also implementing kiosks inside of the courts so that the inmates, if they have credit cards, they could pay their own bills. And we've recently opened up a bail payment center in Queens, which will allow persons to now go to Queens as a borough command also. So those are the plans for the bails.
Is there a place in the Bronx court to pay bail?
So currently there is not. OCA still accepts bails, but we are looking to do within the 3rd phase kiosks to be added to the civilian court sides, which will allow them to be able to post bail for inmates.
Do you have a date for that?
Not as of yet.
And the only borough that you can post bail is in Queens, you said?
We added Queens courts onto an actual person where they can go to a window to pay bail.
Did you increase staffing to accommodate this, these laws, 1, 2, 3, 4, these three city council laws?
Yes.
How many additional?
So we increased staffing in Queens. I don't have the staffing levels which we added for the actual bail window, but in the facilities we've identified bail facilitators, and the officers who are currently working in the new admission areas will be the bail facilitators, and they will receive additional training.
Are you tracking the amount of time that it takes between when a person pays for bail?
So
and
we're
they
working
are
on the
they are
tracking system.
released?
We're working on the tracking system right now. Currently, being that we implemented the 3-hour window frames, that there are emails going from the central cashier's office to the tour commanders, letting them know when they get to the 2-hour window period.
Do you know how many people the DOC facilitators have helped? Do you have a report on that?
Well, we just implemented this, and we're expected to go live on or before the mid-December.
And what about for the $1 bails? Have you developed any plan for that?
Yes, there is an email that goes out daily with all staff, all inmates who have $1 bails, and it goes to the chaplains to ensure that the bails are paid.
So they can just pay them themselves?
Correct.
And is that working?
That is working.
All right. I mean, we received a number of requests, from groups interested in this, and we may be asking you for further information regarding the bail process. I'm glad to hear that it's getting started. I think it was.
Not a problem.
Just a quick question. What was the, can you describe generally what the bail facilitators actually do, what their function is, or what their
Well,
role
what
is?
their function will be is that they will have all of the information. We're going to be giving the inmates all of their information in reference to in the court command, a copy of the IIS, which will give them their next court date, their booking case, their bail conditions, and when they are expected to go back to court. And they will be allowed to assist the inmates if they're going to do the self-bails with credit cards in the courts. So they'll be able to speak to all of that.
It'd be kind of a one-on-one with a particular inmate and a facilitator.
Correct.
To address that particular inmate's issues.
To address the inmate's issue, correct.
And how is the process for someone to be held at the courthouse to pay bail? How does that happen?
So the inmate has to make notification that someone is expected to come and pay bail, and then they will be held over the additional time.
But how do they know that they should make that request?
The inmate?
Yes.
So that's going to be all in the video. We also have videos planned in English and Spanish, which will tell the inmate exactly how they can pay bail.
At the time of arraignment, when does that video happen?
It's going to happen once they are arraigned and they're committed to DLC.
Okay, so in the courthouse.
In the courthouse.
And that's going to be every courthouse, right?
Every courthouse.
Martha?
What is the process for fielding complaints around bail? So considering, the grievance system is obviously a longer process
Right.
for people in custody, but for family members or people who are trying to post bail or people who are inside, if they have a complaint or they're concerned about the timing that it's taking for the bail to
So
be processed
currently,
and
right
released.
now, we're getting all of those complaints that are being filtered through MOCJ, which comes actually to my office if there's an issue with timing, and then we are addressing it live time.
Thank you.
I know you don't have data on it, but what's the procedure when someone gets bail to ensure that they get out within 4 hours unless there's some...
So currently, we are getting live emails to the tour commander and the wardens as to when we get to the 2-hour window period, so that they know that they should start monitoring to make sure that they complete and meet that 3-hour threshold.
Who sends that email?
That's coming from the online bail system and the central cashier.
Thank you.
Do you have any procedure for reviewing what happens when something went wrong? For example, there are a number of cases that have gone 24 hours and
So
that we've heard
once-
about. So do you have any sort of sentinel event process? Or
Once we're notified that there is a violation, then the facility conducts the investigation, and we hold staff accountable where discipline needs to be warranted.
and you have reports on that?
Yes.
Great. Any other questions? Comments from the board? Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much. Oh. All right, we'll turn now back to the three variance requests. First one has to do with Thanksgiving Day. As the department has done in the past, the department requested a variance from minimum standard 1-09C1i to allow it to conduct Thanksgiving Day visiting on a day schedule rather than an evening schedule. The board member moved to to propose this variance?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, anybody, or any proposed conditions to this variance?
There is one. I don't know where it is. It should be in the text of that.
Oh, okay.
Does
No,
anyone
it's not
see a
in the text.
condition? I don't know where it is. Page 5. There's one condition.
Yep.
By November 15th, 2018, the department will notify people in custody and visitors of the change in schedule via inmate council meetings and posters in housing areas, visit areas, libraries, and intakes.
So we review the board's suggestions and the compliance staff.
Thank you.
Any debate, questions, comments on the condition? If not, we'll take a vote on that. Any questions before we go to that? Is there a motion to approve of that condition? Is there a second? Thank you. Mr. Perino? Mr. Richards? Judge Hamel? Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
I vote yes, thank you. Any other conditions? No? So now we will go to a vote on the variance itself. Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
I vote for it. The variance carries. Okay. The next variance is on the ESH and young adults. Martha?
So just before we begin the discussion of ESH, young adult ESH, I just want to highlight that the department's public monthly reports required by the conditions on this variance have yielded important information to ground our discussion today. I want to thank the department for their continued and significant efforts to collect and share more data that helps all of us have a factual and productive understanding of what is happening in ESH, and I want to thank the board staff for reviewing these reports to help inform the board's discussion today. To that end, I just want to offer some big picture context. As of August 1st, 2018, there were 163 young adults placed in ESH since it opened in September 2016. In the last 6 months, March 1st to September 1st, there were 40 placements of young adults in ESH. 68% of those placements into ESH were into level 2, while 32% of those placements went into level 1. During July and August, DOC increased its placements into young adult ESH. Those months saw 12 and 13 placements as compared to an average of 4 placements during March through June. Data confirms that young adults in ESH are spending less time at restraint desks. The proportion of young adults in ESH spending any time at a restraint desk has decreased. The proportion of total time in ESH spent at a restraint desk has also decreased. We also know that young adults in ESH have been in DOC custody for much longer than most people in DOC's custody. The average time in custody, for instance, for the recent census of 20 young adults in ESH was 400 days, or a year and a month. Their median time in custody was 316 days. DOC's reports also show that young adults in ESH are being recommended for progression, but are not always moving to less restrictive units. In the 6 months recently, we saw a total of 87 young adult placement reviews that occurred. 40% of those reviews resulted in a recommendation to progress, but then only 34% of those recommendations actually ended up with a person moving to a less restrictive unit. According to the data, 56% of the people who did not progress didn't progress because of security concerns or pending housing determinations. 40% of people didn't progress because they preferred to stay in a more restrictive unit. So we intend to update the reporting requirements to better monitor that issue in particular, and I know board members will speak to conditions on that issue as well. I also want to point out that since 2017, the board has required the department to audit its compliance with key minimum standards in ESH and to publish those monthly audits. This is a hugely important tool for the department, for the board, and for others to monitor compliance with the minimum standards and to monitor conditions in these units. Each month, the department chooses 4 different dates, 4 random dates, and reviews the logbook entries on those dates to understand out-of-cell time, to understand recreation, law library access, and programming. Additionally, in young adult ESH, the department is required to notify the board whenever there is a late lockout. If you look at the notifications to the board on that issue, in the 6-month period between March 1st and September 1st, the board was notified 158 times of late lockouts in the unit. Those late lockouts ranged quite a bit, from 15 minutes to 36 hours. The late lockouts, if you look at the reporting from DOC, have decreased over time since they've been reporting to the board. 52% of those 158 late lockouts were due to uses of force in the units, 27% were due to an investigation into an incident, and 13% were due to inmate tension. The audits show that in the 6-month period, the average time young adults in Level 1 restraint desk units spent out of their cells, the average time they spent out of their cells was 4 hours and 53 minutes. The average time out of cell in Level 2 was 6 hours and 16 minutes. In Level 3, where young people must be offered 10 hours out of cell, they were out more, or an average of 11 hours and 48 minutes. Law library coordinators were present in ESH on 75% of the audit dates, and they were there for about 4 hours on each of those audit dates. Recreation was also offered on all of the audited dates. DOC made a number of excellent recommendations in each of these audits. We intend to work with DOC to make these audits even more useful, and we thank them for their timely dedication to them to date. And now we'll turn it over to DOC to present their request.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Timothy Farrell, Senior Deputy Commissioner. I'm presenting a 6-month limited variance for the renewal request to BOC minimum standards for the use of enhanced supervision housing for young adults 18 to 21-year-olds. Pursuant to Section 1-15 of the New York City Board of Corrections minimum standards, the department requests a 6-month renewal to the limited variance from BOC minimum standards 1-16 subsection C1, which requires that as of January 1st, 2016, inmates aged 18 through 21, provided that sufficient resources are made available to the department for necessary staffing and implementation of necessary alternative program, be excluded from placement in enhanced supervision housing, ESH. The department seeks this variance renewal to be effective November 17, 2018, the date upon which the current variance is set to expire. I have with me Deputy Warden Renee, Deputy Commissioner Tauzik, who oversee the ESH program at OBCC, and they will be willing to respond to any questions.
So the process, what we'll do is, there are conditions which I think people are going to... Yeah, sure. Yeah, there are plenty of questions. I'm just going to say what we do is we just move to vote on this, and then we have a discussion, and then everyone can raise their conditions. We're not taking a vote. We're just approving this for a vote. Go ahead.
I believe within this variance request, the term activity desk is used. I don't even want to consider a proposal that does not identify this as a restraint desk rather than as an activity desk. So I would just ask the department to agree to change, to not use language so that way. I mean, we passed this. We didn't know about restraint desks when we approved ESH. Now we know about them. Say it. Is that okay with you?
We refer to them as program and activity desks because that's where they conduct their programs and their activities.
Where people have their legs shackled and restrained to a desk.
The legs are restrained, yes.
And both legs are shackled, yes, okay.
Both legs are restrained.
But what about, because this is actually very confusing, we have conditions that use the term restraint desks, and yet again, the term is being changed. Is that the same desk that we've been seeing in enhanced supervision that was called previously a restraint desk?
Those are the same desks.
Okay, and when the inmates...
Same desk, you change the name of it.
Correct.
And when the inmates are locked out pursuant to their lockout time, but there's not school or particular activity going on, is that the same desk? Are they in fact locked into it, or because there's no activity, are they free to walk around?
If they're assigned to a level 1, they are secured to the restraint desks.
So it's used for all lockout time, regardless of whether there's an activity or school going on, correct?
If they're in level 1 status, yes.
It's a restraint desk.
So it's not being used for programming or anything, it's just using for restraining people.
When they are locked out of their cells, they take care of their programming and activities while in those restraint desks.
So, Chair, I just have a procedural question.
Sure.
DOC is presenting a variance. In the context of the discussion after the motion is made, in my opinion, I would need further information from the department now to participate in that discussion. So my question is whether we can ask the questions now before the motion is moved and we have discussion, or whether you want us to ask questions in the middle of what should just be a discussion period.
No, I think whatever you think will facilitate a more fruitful discussion is the way we should proceed.
All right, so I have a number of questions. And first, I just want to say, last time I was out and had supervision with the young adults, Deputy Warden Renee was there. And as I said, last time I didn't have an opportunity because you weren't present. But I really do commend the way that you are running enhanced supervision. You clearly have staff that are very well trained, very respectful to the young people. And as I think I did state before, there were teachers there was a lot of education going on. So I was very pleased with what I said. But notwithstanding that, and I recall we had a conversation, I still continue to have real concerns. According to your own audit, the young people are being, the minimum standard is 7 hours of lockout. That is what the commissioner recommended to us when we were in enhanced supervision rulemaking. That was what you all agreed to when we agreed to enhanced supervision. That was really meant to be a stopgap while you had expand hours a day.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It can range from a variation of things. Simple fact that inmate don't want to come out their cell, that's one reason. To if they're in the shower, things of that nature. So every hour they get an option to sit there and come out of their cell, whether they choose to or not. So that time period that you see, the 5 hours, that's a cumulative of everything throughout the whole day that was added up that showed the 5 hours of that one inmate that had their out of cell time.
Okay, let me ask you this. When I was there, you were very candid and said that in the morning, the young adults actually correct me, is it the young adults in level 1 that go to school in the level 1 unit in the morning, or is it the young adults in other levels that come to?
Well, we have other ESH inmates come to the unit in the morning.
And that's the morning. Okay, so what you had said, in the morning, it's used for other than the young adults in that level 1. Correct. And in the afternoon, you had indicated at that time, and this was a couple of months ago.
In the afternoon, about approximately 12:30, the inmates in that unit go to school.
Right. Now, and you also indicated that only the young adults who wish to go to school can come out. Those who do not wish to go to school cannot come out. And I'd asked, and you said, therefore, for inmates who aren't willing to go to school, they're only allowed 4 hours out of cell. And so I told you at that time, that's actually a violation of the standard. It's a violation of the variance condition, which we were all very clear about, that the 3 hours of school
Judge, may I?
was to be in addition to the 7 hours of out of cell.
Correct.
In fact, it's the reverse.
Fortunately,
You're only getting 4 hours instead of 10 hours.
Fortunately, at this time, currently, all the inmates in that housing area goes to school.
But we're not going to talk about just here today, in general.
Well, we already identified an area that we can move the school to if we come across that situation.
Where is that?
That will be 1 South. where we do our multidisciplinary hearings. We could utilize that as a multidisciplinary, we could utilize that as a multi-space and move the school down there if we come across that situation.
So then those inmates who do not want to go to school would still get their 7 hours of out of cell?
Correct.
Right. But let's look at, that's good to hear. So
Definitely.
I wonder, why wait until that arises? Why not do it now? And since the board condition in its number 10, and I'll read it, the department shall provide all young adults housed in enhanced supervision with a minimum of out-of-cell time of 7 hours per day, not inclusive of school. So if you were to move the housing for the other young adults in level 2 and above to another place now, that means our young adults in the most restrictive unit for young adults would have a much better chance at rehabilitation if they got the 3 hours of school in the morning and then they had their 7 hours of lockout in the afternoon. That would give those who want to go to school 10 hours of lockout, which is consistent with the board condition. So is there a reason you cannot implement that right now, since that was the agreement that's not been met by the department?
Good morning, Board. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning.
That is definitely something that we can take under advisement and look at all dynamics involving that in terms of split-tier recreation, in terms of conflicts that we have amongst the population. But if that's something that is doable, that's logistically doable, certainly we can implement that quickly, yes.
Right, but
Are you already familiar with this issue, or is this something that's just being brought to your attention now? I mean, were you aware that this issue was going on and you were actually out of compliance?
We are aware of that we've been constantly struggling with how to meet compliance with that particular factor, yes.
Right. But according to the deputy warden, you all have identified, you've already identified another place that we can have school. And I remember Ms. Torres, at the last board meeting, I engaged in a conversation with her about the problem that we were having. I mean, this is an issue I've brought up again and again and again and again. I think enhanced supervision, especially in light of the way it's being run, could in fact be a very good unit. But when these young people are only having 4 hours, you know, they may exercise bad judgment and not go to school, but they're only getting 4 hours out. Yes, they're staying in custody very long periods of time. And yes, hopefully we're preventing some violence in Rikers, but what we know is these young people are ultimately going to be released to society and they're going to come out angrier than ever. So why not, since you have a place to move the school now, why not just do it? Move it, let the young people come out for the morning school, and then they'll have the afternoon out. I don't think it's a staffing problem, because when I was there must have been 10 officers. There was a lot of staff, and it was very orderly, and the young people were very, very orderly and very respectful as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, just to bring it to a different perspective, just so that we understand that the inmates in that area, although they go to school at 12:30, they get their showers in the morning, they'll go to rec in the morning, other mandated service will take care of in the morning.
Right, it's a separate issue. Right.
I just have to add, I mean, we've had a discussion about this for a year. You told us over a year ago that you had written to the SCOC when we asked you to construct a school room. When we asked for those plans, you showed us plans that you had sent to them January or February, nothing from last year. We've heard nothing about those plans subsequently, and certainly the teachers who were there feel that their ability to teach is compromised substantially by not having a classroom. And this is something that you've known about for well over a year.
We have submitted those plans to construct a enclosed classroom within the housing units. Unfortunately, those design plans were denied by SCOC.
When did they deny them?
I don't have the date in front of me. So what we are doing is we are going to be working with our design team to submit another set of plans to get SCOC review and approval, because I don't want to give up a housing unit just for a classroom use. If I can construct a classroom in those housing units, that is the option we want to go, because we believe that to be the best option to provide these services on unit. It's getting the acceptable design plans for the infrastructure changes approved, and then constructed. But in the interim, we will be using, as Judge Hamill has indicated, we will be working with 1 South because that is currently a closed unit and we can schedule around it with the review hearings that are done there. And we will do that to enhance the educational opportunities for this population.
I just have a couple more questions. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. We all know that education is the key to success for young people, whether they're incarcerated or not, so we want them to have that. It appears, at least from the materials we've been given, that you all are holding most of the 15-day reviews. You're making recommendations to move young people, and then they're not moving.
And we understand that to be a challenge, and this particular population has a lot of influence with various gangs and rival gangs and trying to find, and we are limited in the housing units that we can rotate and find compatible housing with this population. We understand that to be a challenge. We continue to work with the security team, the programming team, to find suitable housing. We want to move these individuals through the levels as fast as we can, but as safely as we can. So finding, though, that mixture is sometimes challenging. But we do recognize that. And we are working forward with that, and we also have on the table potentially creating additional housing units for additional levels to create more flexibility and more swing space to accommodate this population. That's all in the review process, because finding a housing unit dedicated for a small population requires displacing a larger set of population, and sometimes that's, so there are a lot of moving parts at this, but we do understand it. We're not blind to it. It's just that we want to ensure that when we move individuals into other housing units, it's as safely as possible. We don't create additional territorial issues, thereby increasing violence. So,
right, but you do understand it's counterproductive. You tell a young person you do this, this, and this. They do this, this, and this. They get to the review, they're passed on to move, and then they don't move. What's the incentive for keeping up the good behavior?
Judge, if I can speak to that very point. We've done over 800 reviews through the multidisciplinary team, and it's a dynamic that we're faced with on a weekly basis. Individual comes in, he's progressing well, doing some programming, whether in cell as well as out of cell, and then as we proceed with making a recommendation to move, the individual poses an issue with us that if he's moved, that there's a threat on him if he advances, or that he's been put to task that if he does not commit an act when he moves, that something's going to happen. So these are gradual steps that we're making with a very complex situation, that as soon as we're put on notice that there can be an incident if that individual is advanced, now we have to go through a multitude of avenues to try to ascertain what best to do for that individual. Do we keep him at his present level and then monitor him how he's doing behaviorally as well as programmatically, and then move him, which contradicts the level system advancement philosophy? So it's very complex. And I think the team in ESH does a very good job of opening dialogue with these individuals. Just this last couple of weeks, we had very complex issues in that housing area, in that program, that we were very proactive with, that resulted in totally mitigating possible issues that were going to take part in that unit. So it's a very complex issue. We deal with it. We engage with the individuals to try to get some feedback from them about what could possibly cure this situation. We have Cure Violence and various outside members that are going to be coming in and offering services, hopefully in December, which was not a delay on the department's part, which was not a delay on the program staff's part. It was just a delay in the MOU and getting that rolling.
How long was that delay?
It's been a couple of months. Oh, no. It's been a couple of months that once we firmed up that MOU and we needed some more information. But we hope to get that rolling in the beginning of December. So I push on that issue on a weekly basis to get those folks in. So I'm looking forward to that.
In terms of these other units, I mean, right now at this point, we used to have True and Shoe, and then we had Cure, and now Enhanced Supervision level 1, 2, 3. So Cure seems to be a pretty good program and really underutilized. Can any of these people move over to secure? I think you've only got a couple of young people in there now. In other words, they don't necessarily need to go to level 2. If they're doing well, you want to reward that behavior. And the whole idea was that you could use secure as a step down from enhanced supervision. So can any of them move? And do you, in fact, ever move from level 1 over to secure? Which seems to be
We don't necessarily move from level 1 directly into secure. It's usually level 1 to level 2. But we do use secure unit as a step down, a quasi level 3 for the young adult population, because that does give us the ability to manage those 18 to 21. 18-year-olds seem to be our biggest challenge because they can't commingle with those that are 22 and above. The 19 and 21-year-olds, we can commingle them, and we have more flexibility in getting them into a level 3 ESH unit. But until we identify a location to create a pure level 3 ESH for young adults, we do use the secure unit. We do review those individuals who are currently in a level 2 setting to see if they can coexist and be productive in the secure environment. We have, in understanding that complex young adult ESH level 1, that was 3 Southwest. We created 3 South, which was a level 1 for young adult. That's our level 2 ESH. So that gives us the flexibility to manage the young adult population and have suitable housing for them. It's the level 3 that we do admit is the challenging one, and we do use secure as a unit to address that population when we can.
I think it would be more helpful if you would be more clear about things. For example, you had a meeting our staff attended in April saying that you were launching these credible messenger program. Then you were going to, the next week you were going to gangify areas because you had established SRG units, which you now had to, and then you didn't do it. So that was 6 months ago, 7 months ago. So I mean, when you said you were going to launch that thing the next week. And the schoolroom issue, this has been a year and a half. As you submitted these plans to SCOC 11 months ago, I was at ESH on Friday, and there were some very positive things. And I think the department needs an ESH 2 and a 3. I don't think you need. I don't know, but my guess is that now you have 6 levels of restrictive, punitive housing for young adults. You have Second Chance, you have TRU, you have Secure, you have EH1, ESH2, ESH3. For good reasons, you eliminated ESH4.
Second Chance and True has full lockout GP options, so I would beg to differ that we call them restrictive or punitive.
Well, okay. So you have 4. Is that it? Just 4 units? You have TRU is full lockout?
Yes.
Okay. For how many hours?
Full BOC minimum standard lockout.
Okay, sorry, just 4 units. And I did walk around there, and and I think units 2 and 3 are what you need. It is the board voted for an administrative segregation unit to support the closing of ending of solitary for young adults, and that's what we voted for. We certainly didn't vote for anything called restraint desks or anything called program desk. I really resent your distorting the language here. You shouldn't do that. And it is a serious problem that the board for the for the nth time. It's not the nth, but it's the 4th or 5th time is confronting the issue of endorsing your use of routine, continuous, prolonged restraints. Some of these people are, many of these people are in ESH for hundreds of days. And I also don't think it's best to sort of describe the problem of moving people out, which is the whole idea of the progress, just based upon the people who are refusing to go out. I spoke to one person. I haven't talked to the medical staff yet. When I was there on Friday, who says, I want to stay in here because I'm a very disturbed person. Whenever I leave and go into a congregate area, I'm violent. And I've been doing that since I was in grade school. And I'm afraid to leave here. And mental health is well aware of me. And medical is well aware of me. And please contact them because I want you to believe me. And I just thought, having a person who I believe is psychotic, I'm not a psychiatrist, I am a doctor, in there, and of course you're not going to see him because he's tautologically fine, right? I mean, you couldn't get into ESH if you were not, if you were mentally ill. So to define the problem of progress through these things when it is a problem of you're creating a unit and then not creating the spaces for people to go to. I mean, you can't blame that on them, which is what you're doing right now. This is not a new problem. This is the second 6-month analysis we've done, which showed the same thing. You know exactly what the problem is. You know about the schools. You know about this. So, and the fact, just summarizing, the majority of people leave ESH because they're no longer in your custody. That's why they leave. The next group don't leave because you don't have any place for them to go. There is some progress, but it's of a small number of people, and you only have 4 people in restraints right now. I did find the staff very, very supportive. I found the captains and the deputy wardens really. They were caring about the situation, and I was glad to meet them, and it really felt like a change over the past 6 months positively, and just want to not compliment you, endorse that. So, we have a lot of conditions which we're going to discuss right now, but I think that. The board should not normalize, I'm just going to say that, should not normalize something as profoundly degrading as shackling, the only time when you're not locked in your cell by yourself. And you only have 4 people in there right now. The people who go into secure go in there because of stabbings and slashings. The department has the capacity to take care of 4 people without putting leg irons on both of their ankles and tying them together and securing that to a metal rod. So I think when the board, and we're going to, we'll work this out today, or we'll work it out soon in the future. When this society continuously approves things which are inhumane and really problematic, it's a problem. And every time we do it, every time we say we're going to keep doing this for another few months, or another few months, or another few months, then it legitimizes bad things. And I saw a stupid movie that took place during the 4 days of the Rodney King deliberations yesterday. But the point of the movie was that they were acquitted. And the point of Trayvon Martin is that he was acquitted, and the point of Emmett Till was that they were acquitted. And shackling is not the same as killing someone, but it is really. It is not something that New York City should do. So there's going to be a motion to close this down, and we'll get to it.
If I can just respond to your point, Doctor. Yeah. There was no one in the department, nor myself. I've been doing this far too long that has blamed the population for the situation. I have never held one individual to blame for being placed in an ESH or another housing location.
Well,
the
but
housing
you say
location is merely a response to a situation that developed prior to that placement. So just for the record, I did not stand here and blame inmates for them being housed in ESH, nor did the department. So I'd like to leave it at that.
I apologize for personalizing it. I was saying that the department set up a system which involves progressing people out of it, and then did not set up a system which allowed them to progress people out of it. And the explanation is because these men have too complex a situation for you to accommodate, and that's what I was referencing.
Thank you for that. And during our reviews, just so the board is aware, we speak about mutual accountability on a weekly basis with these individuals. So there's no casting of blame. It's about trying to find solutions to a very complex problem.
I think what Dr. Cohen was trying to convey, and I think others on the board, is generally the board's frustration with where ESH now has morphed to from what it was that was originally approved by this board. Frustrated in the lack of effort, or certainly lack of success in addressing the restraints issue. And the issue, as Dr. Cohen, Judge Hamill cited, people go through ESH, they meet the requirements, they're eligible and approved for being moved out of it, and then they don't. So, you know, I just hope the department understands what message is trying to be conveyed here, that, you know, we're just becoming increasingly impatient to continuing to approve of this unit, given the deficiencies, given the problems we see with it, and given that it really has morphed into something, transitioned into something quite different from what was ever contemplated or what was ever approved by the board. So that's one message you ought to take away from this morning, whether or not the variance passes. But it's something that we're just getting frustrated about. Yeah.
I'd like to put my spin on it a little. A few years ago, we had a lot of people in punitive segregation. And the department has given up punitive segregation for adolescents, which we no longer house, which was a big task, and then young adults. What I think we should have done, and I believe in the past we were going to, but funds, you know, caused it not to happen way before many people in this room's time, is that they were going to build a secure facility where instead of housing people in punitive segregation, we could house them safely to keep people separate, but yet not in punitive segregation. Now, we didn't do that, and we were diligent. I think the department did a great job in ending punitive segregation in many ways. And as young adults, it's a huge task. ESH was a plan to when we closed punitive segregation, it was a plan to house individuals. But with plans, and when we go according to, you know, see how it works, it wasn't enough, because there are some violent individuals. No matter what you do, they're going to hurt other people. And our job is to keep people safe, bottom line. So you'll always have my support with this variance, with the cuffing and whatever you want to call it, shackling, because we need another place, another unit, and I believe, Tim, you were saying, to build somewhere where we could put these individuals that just have a propensity of violence and keep them safe without having to shackle them. So today, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, we're going to be at the same spot with this variance unless we find another way to house these individuals that will keep them safe from each other, keep them safe, a safe environment, keep the officers safe in a way which it's done in other states, you know? So I think that's something we should look at. I think Chief Jennings has done an outstanding job with ESH. Deborah Renee has done an outstanding job. I've been there. I mean, that place was on fire a little while ago. Well, maybe not a little while ago, but a while ago it was on fire. Now it seems like everything, I see uses of force. Very rarely do I see OBCC. You know, so I think that's going in a great direction, but I think it's important to focus on another place, another idea, because we will be here 6 years from now with the same issue, because the chief is always going to need that option that when someone's out there and it's going to hurt somebody else, we got to prevent it. And right now, I believe that's one of the only ways we can prevent it.
By the way, I agree with that. I don't think that's inconsistent with what's been said today. I agree with that as well, and I thank you for making that point, Mr. Perino.
I don't mean to disagree with you, but I'm going to disagree with you because I don't think we're talking about the people who are committing violent acts, right? Somebody commits a violent act, they go into ESH level 1, right? We got that. We're talking about, so they're there, they're being held accountable, they have been evaluated, and based on your own evaluation, you're saying this person is ready for the next level or the next thing. This person does no longer need to be restrained. This person no longer needs to be in EHS level 1. That's who we're talking about, and that's what we're talking about. And I think what Judge Hamill said about, we set up a protocol for young people. We tell them, you know, you do all these things, and as a result of doing these things, you're going to get this increased whatever, and then we don't deliver, we're perpetuating the situation that could create violence and anger and frustration. And I want to hear from the department, like, what is your solution to this? And there's two things I want to hear about. The 7 hours, you know what the problem is. What is your solution? And then when people are evaluated and you determine that they are no longer in need of the most restrictive way of being detained, what is the plan to move them out? What is the plan?
Stanley, thank you. As I've stated before, we understand that we have a challenge, and we understand that these individuals need to move when they do what they're supposed to do, and they've been recommended and identified by the programming team and the security team that they're ready to move on to the next level. We understand that, and we need to do a better job at making sure that happens, and we have that flow of succession. So that's what we are working on is, and I think space is our biggest challenge right now. It's finding the suitable housing unit space that can manage the population without disrupting our general population, because we have a balancing act. We still have these housing units. We need them for our general population, higher class individuals, okay? Every time we open up a new ESH, identify a new housing unit at OBCC, that causes us to take 50 beds offline, and that's 50 other locations that we have to find for this population. So we are constantly looking at that. Right now we have one south that is down. We're going to be using that more for interim school space for them. But that is also space that could be utilized as an additional housing unit if we can find a suitable location for the school. So there's a kind of, I don't want to say it's a domino theory, but there's a lot of things that have to happen to go into getting this done. But we understand that, and we are going to be looking at other units that we can increase the number of our level 2 and level 3 housing units so we can stop that kind of clog at that level 1 and get these individuals moving through the system when they're supposed to.
We appreciate you conceding that you understand the problem, but soon you're going to have to come here with a solution. And that day is getting closer. That we've talked about this, and you understand the problem. You concede that, but we really do need to move to a solution and start implementation. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood. Are we saying that we have people in level 1 ESH because we don't have space to put them anywhere else? Because my understanding is only the chief of the department can put people in that particular
level.
It's more
level 2s moving to 3s.
I mean, with the restraint desk and stuff like that. Like if someone's in that most maximum spot, I was under the impression that only the chief of the department can say we need to keep them in and override when it's time for them to go.
The majority is our level 2s moving to level 3s.
But it is both.
I don't know that we have any.
Both when he says majority. Yeah.
One statistic
for you all to think about, and you don't have complete control over this, but I think as citizens we do. I mean, the average incarceration time for the four, there are just 4 guys there now, the 4 young adults in ESH. Well, on August 1st there were 4. Was 410 days. That's how long they were. That was the average time in custody, and the median was 307. The minimum time was 308 days, and the maximum time was 515 days. As I've looked at this over the years, the people who end up getting in trouble are people who get stuck on Rikers Island, and spending these are people who may have been 16 when they came to Rikers Island. They may have been 17 when they came to Rikers Island. They were, many of them were 18. They're 19. This is when they arrived on Rikers, and they spent the past couple of years there, and that makes people more violent, I think.
Well, we work
And we
with-
probably agree on that.
We do, and we work with Chief
Well, just
Jennings'
saying that, I mean,
office
just
and the courts, the various
No,
court
I understand. It's
administrators trying to
just that when we
accelerate
end up creating a situation, I understand, I'm just saying, when we end up creating a situation in New York City where people are placed in restraints because we can't develop a functional system which keeps them out of jail or gets them through the system, then that's a serious problem. And we can't solve it, and say it's okay by keeping people in restraints.
Richard, do you have something you wanted to add, or? Perino? Yeah. Anyone else at the board before we? So we would need a motion and a second to consider this variance, and then we'll talk about the various conditions. Okay? Is there a motion? We need a motion, otherwise there's nothing to consider, even the conditions. Is there a second? Thank you. Second. Okay. Martha, you were going to talk about the conditions?
Just a point. Can I do all of them together? What? So I'm going to read, forgive me, I'm going to read quite a bit. These are going to be a combination of the existing conditions on this variance, and then there are some additions proposed by board members that I will note as I read which ones are new. No, because that's not a condition. Would it be? So I'm going to start. 1, the department may operate multiple levels of young adult ESH, with level 1 being the most restrictive. There shall not be a separate unit for assessment purposes. 2, a young adult can be placed in young adult ESH level 1 only if the person has recently participated in an actual or attempted slashing or stabbing, or engaged in activity that caused serious injury to an officer, another person in custody, or any other person, and provided that the use of a restraint desk is the least restrictive option necessary for the safety of others. 3, restraints, including restraint desks, shall not be used except to control an incarcerated person who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage, for healthcare purposes, or when necessary as a security precaution during transfer or transport. When restraints are necessary, the department shall use the least restrictive forms of restraints that are appropriate and should use them only as long as the need exists. 4, each request for approval of a placement of a young adult in young adult ESH, i.e. any ESH unit where young adults are housed, must be in writing and specify the reasons why a less restrictive housing setting is not a safe option. If the placement is to include the use of a restraint desk, the request for approval must include why young adult ESH without restraint desks is not a safe option. The chief of department or designee must also specify her reasons for approving or disapproving the request for young adult ESH placement. If the placement is to include the use of a restraint desk, the chief or her designee must separately approve or disapprove this use and specify her reasons for approving or disapproving the use of a restraint desk. The request for approval and the chief's or designee's approval or disapproval thereof shall be sent within 24 hours to the person who is the subject of the request, New York City Health and Hospitals, and the board. 5, this condition has new language added to it. The department shall review each young adult in level 1 ESH every 15 days and each young adult in any other level every 21 days to determine whether the person will advance to a less restrictive level or unit. 6, at each such review, a young adult will advance to a less restrictive level or unit unless 1, he has engaged in violent or aggressive behavior while in his current level, and or 2, there is credible intelligence that he may engage in additional violence in a less restrictive unit, and/or 3, he has willfully disregarded rules and regulations, and these instances are reported and documented. If 1, 2, or 3 is applicable, DOC shall make a specific determination that the restraint desk remains necessary to control this incarcerated person who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, or to prevent serious property damage. 7 is a new condition. If the department's review of a young adult recommends progression to a less restrictive level or unit, the young adult shall be moved to the recommended level or unit. If the young adult is not moved within 48 hours of such recommendation, DOC shall notify the board in writing within 48 hours of its decision not to move the person. The notification shall include the reason the department did not move the young adult to a less restrictive level or unit. 8 is a new condition. A young adult recommended to progress to a less restrictive level or unit shall not remain in their current unit solely due to lack of available housing elsewhere, e.g. progression recommended to level 2. However, a co-defendant is already in level 2. Back to existing conditions. Number 9, the department shall not keep K-9 stationed in young adult ESH units. 10, the department shall provide all young adults housed in ESH with a minimum out-of-cell time of 7 hours per day, not inclusive of school hours. If exceptional circumstances occur where the department cannot comply, it will notify the board immediately as to the reasons why it cannot comply. 11, the department shall notify the board in writing every time the lockout periods in young adult ESH do not start on time and the reasons therefore. The department shall provide written notice to the board within 24 hours of such occurrence. Condition 12 has one addition. The department shall conduct and report on a monthly audit of its compliance with BOC minimum standards and education services. A, 105B lock-in, specifically the number of out-of-cell hours per person. B, 108F, access to courts and legal services, including law library. C, 106, recreation. And D, 102C2, classification, specifically the number of programming hours offered to each young adult and the number of hours each young adult participated in programming. Here's the new addition, E, education services, specifically the number of young adults DOC brought to school, and for each young adult, the time DOC brought him to school and the time DOC took him out. The department shall provide its monthly audit report to the board by the 10th business day of the following month. 13, where the department is permitted to consider a young adult's activity occurring where the department is permitted to consider a young adult's activity occurring or actions committed at a time prior to the incident in connection with the young adult's placement in young adult ESH, such activity or actions must have occurred within the preceding year. 14, the department shall offer 5 hours of programming to each young adult in young adult ESH each day. For young adults enrolled in school, the 5 hours of programming can include 3 hours of school. 15, within 60 days, the department shall develop a curriculum and plan to provide specialized trainings, including crisis intervention and conflict resolution training to all young adult ESH staff. The department shall update the board at the July public meeting or some future meeting as to its projected timeline for implementation. Can we just strike that? We'll strike that, number 15. 16, the department shall provide the board with a public report on the implementation of the foregoing conditions. The requirements for this report are outlined in a document titled ESH and Secure Unit Variances Public Reporting Condition, dated November 13th, 2018, and available on the board's website. On at least 17, on at least a monthly basis, the department shall provide the board access to all documentation considered in each young adult ESH placement and review decision for young adults. This includes, but is not limited to, all records reviewed or created by young adult ESH adjudication, health and hospitals placement review, the chief's reviews, and the young adult ESH periodic review. On a monthly basis, the department shall transmit to the board a list of all young adult ESH placements and reviews. The department shall provide this documentation for each month by the 10th business day of the following month. Documentation for the month this variance expires shall be provided by the 5th day of the following month. The end.
Is a condition.
Okay.
I mean, we can mention it now.
Yeah, no, you can do it now. Why don't you just put it on now?
We may have another couple of conditions to be proposed, but I'm also going to propose that this is a 3-month extension, not a 6-month, for the reasons that we discussed earlier. Do you care to address these conditions, or?
We prefer the 6 months, but we will accept 3 months.
Any discussion at the board now on those conditions?
So I have a question concerning, condition 8. You, doesn't seem you're objecting to it, but I want to understand how you would implement it. 8 requires that a young adult recommended to progress to a less restrictive level, or units shall not remain in their current unit solely due to lack of available housing elsewhere. How would you address that?
That's the plan Derek Cephas asked me to come up with, and that's identifying housing units and creating that and using secure as an additional housing and other options that we currently have.
Okay, but you're accepting it,
Yes,
right?
we accept it.
So you'll be in compliance.
We are accepting it, yes.
Well, can I ask, are you also accepting condition 10 that you've accepted all along but haven't been in compliance with, or have you now developed a plan?
Which one's 10? My 10 is K9. I lost track when we deleted some.
So the 10 that the department shall provide all young adults housed with enhanced supervision with a minimum out of cell time of 7 hours, not inclusive of school hours. And those who want to go to school get an additional period. That had always been the agreement, but you've been in violation, and more recently I learned it was much worse than I thought. It was only been 4 hours about a cell time. Are you going to in fact implement a plan to use the other school, the other facility?
One South will, yes. Yes, I believe I indicated that we were going to identify that space as interim educational space until we can get something permanently
So you
established.
will actually, I know your college
Yes.
will take it under advisement, so I'm just looking for an agreement that you will do that.
If
Yes.
I may just add, the concern of the reasons that you're putting in your conditions, or we are stating conditions that have not been met, or that you plan to meet, but it's a condition here that's not for a plan to be created, but to actually do it.
Understood.
Okay, so unless the department, I'm sorry, unless the department has another comment on, this, we will have a vote on these conditions, and then we will go back to the board and open up the floor for any additional conditions that anyone might want to propose. So, with regard to the conditions that are on the table now, is there a motion to vote on those? Is there a second?
Motion.
Yep, okay. Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just want to say that generally, despite everything else I said, this process of conditions, which involved the department and the board working together in the week prior to the meeting, I thought was a very positive thing, and I want to thank the department for your participation and, in support of that. Yes, I vote yes for the conditions.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Those carry. Are there any other conditions that anyone wants to propose?
Did you vote?
I vote in favor. Dr. Cohen?
Yeah. I have a I'd like to propose another condition, which is, as written and the board has received, it says by December I would happily accept a friendly amendment saying for February or March or April or even May, that by December 31st, 2018, or I'll change it, by May 1st, 2018, the department. What? 3 months? Okay, 3 months. By 3 months, the department shall eliminate the use of restraints other than for escorting or transporting people in custody, including restraint desks during out-of-cell time and YAESH.
Seconded.
Any discussion of the condition? Department, you care to comment on that?
Well, we would ask that this particular condition be deferred at least until the commissioner is here. It's a very important topic for this department, and we're just learning about this added condition. As Bobby, as you mentioned, being able to engage with the board on the existing conditions from last week put us all in a position to at least give some thought and have back and forth. And all the other conditions have been discussed and have had no issues at this point in time. But this is a new condition that we're just learning about, and I would ask that it be deferred.
I just want to address that. I mean, this is what the board's been asking for. This is what the board's been asking for and saying it's wanted for a really, really long time. And this is what some of these conditions, the ABA standards, were really meant to achieve. So I mean, it's within 3 months. So therefore, when your next variance comes up, that's when this would be concluding. You can ask, you can ask that it be extended, but I think the point is that we really need you all to start working on the alternative to the restraint. So I don't see, I mean, I think the commissioner's on notice that this is what the board's wanted for a long time. Yeah.
I would also add that this is also in terms of this very specific condition regarding the use of restraint desks. That's something that I know that we would need to confer with the Nunez monitor. There are provisions in the consent judgment that requires a continuum. Not sure how this would impact the continuum that we're offering and that we would have. So for those reasons, I think we would ask that it be deferred for another time.
I'd like to just respond to that too. As I know I've stated before, the consent judgment in the federal court and the monitor, that's the constitutional minimum. That's the floor. We can give more rights to incarcerated inmates here in New York City than is given to them in the consent judgment. And again, this is 3 months, so I don't think that's a bar to us voting on that as well. And hopefully what this will do is prompt a conversation starting sooner rather than later, since it's what we've been working towards for a really long time. And just, as everybody knows, and I was one that took the lead in advocating to this board to adopt enhanced supervision because I really thought it was going to be a stopgap measure, number one, and number two, never in my wildest dreams did I think that restraint desks were going to be used the entire time they were locked out of cell. And that could very well be why many of them don't want to come out, because they don't want to be tied down. They have more liberty in their cell not being restrained.
The reason that I had proposed the 3-month variance rather than the 6-month is to really give the department the opportunity to seriously address these questions in a concise time frame, but also to force the department to address these issues in a concise time frame. So I'm not going to support Dr. Cohen's condition, although I do think that at the end of the 3 months, we would expect that the department would have some substantive plan ready to be launched, and as Jones-Austin says, ready to be implemented rather than continuing to discuss. So this 3-month period you really are going to have to use to address this issue of restraints. Mr. Perino had made the point there may be some need for some limited either restraints or a separate housing unit where people like that who might otherwise need restraints will have an opportunity to live in an area that's safe for them and safe for other inmates as well and safe for the staff. So this is, I think, again, the department needs to understand the urgency with which you need to address all of this. It's been a long time, and I think the board is moving quite rapidly to a point where this is an issue that's going to have to get resolved in a way that gets us closer to where ESH was designed to be in the first place.
I appreciate the chair's comments and generally, and agree with them, in terms of the importance of moving forward. And I'm hopeful. I just want to respond, Heidi, that the reason I didn't raise this is because I've had 2 meetings with the commissioner specifically to discuss this issue. Members of the board had meetings, and there was no there was no room to have this discussion. So that's why I didn't raise it as part of the prior week's discussion. And your draft, your variance report specifically says put this stuff into the rules. And you've taken a pretty clear position on the use of restraint desks. So I certainly do think. So that's why. And I appreciate I understand the back and forth on that. I don't think we should call whatever we're going to vote for. Are we still going to have them called activity desks?
It's a restraint desk. It's not
Okay.
a program desk or an activity. It's a restraint. I mean, and we all know it's a restraint,
Yes, right. Okay.
no matter what
All
it's.
right. Anyway, I appreciate the conversation. So I'm going to vote for my resolution, but understand and appreciate the chair's commitment and the department's commitment, based on what you just said, Heidi, to have it to begin right away discussions about how we can get from where we are right now to someplace better quickly.
Mr. Richards.
Yeah, just that this conversation should be a conversation putting the department on notice about the restraint desk. We were able to do something and secure where there was a limited use of restraint desk, and we've seen periods of time where restraint desk wasn't used, right? So we want to get there, and we think we can get there. And so when we come back, we hope that the department comes back with a plan to move the EHS issues forward and address the restraint desk. So we really are looking forward to the department's plan on that.
Any other comments on Dr. Cohen's condition of ending restraints? So we will need a vote for that. Start the other end. Ms. Sherman?
No.
Ms. Perino?
No.
Richards?
No.
Judge Hammond?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Jones-Austin? Yep. I vote against it as well. So are there any other conditions that anyone wants to propose?
I just add that with my vote no. I agree with my colleagues. Find another way. But we can't put people in jeopardy and in harm's way because people would get hurt. So I really, I just want the department to really think hard. Like, this can't be 6 years from now. Let's figure out another way of, housing people safe. This very delicate, sensitive, and dangerous population, some of them.
Dr. Cohen, we do appreciate your leadership on this issue, Judge Hammond as well. But
I feel very supported.
we're moving this in the right direction. Okay, so now we just vote on the technical.
Condition with the variance. With the variance with the condition.
Right. So the next item is we will now vote on the variance request with the conditions that have been approved, which is ones Martha read and the 3-month variance. So is there a motion for that?
Motion.
Is there a second? Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Ms. Perino?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
I'm constrained to vote no because the department continues to violate our conditions, only giving young adults on average less than 5 hours of lockout and making them choose between school and their lockout. So I can't continue to support it. This was not the enhanced supervision I envisioned when I supported our adoption of it.
Understood. Dr. Cohen?
No.
Yeah. Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
Yes. And I vote yes. The motion carries. Yeah.
So now we'll move on to discussion of secure. Similarly to our discussion of ESH, I'll just start off summarizing some key points found in DOC's public reports and audits as context. As of September 1st, DOC had placed 62 young adults in Secure since June 2016. The average daily population in Secure through July was between 6 and 7 young adults. The average length of stay for young adults exiting Secure was 83 days. The median length of stay was 76 days. Since the last update to the board and the last vote on Secure, there have been 13 people who exited from Secure. 54% of exits from Secure were due to the young adult completing all phases of the program. 25% of the exits from Secure were due to being discharged from custody. Between March 1st and August 1st, there were also 26 placement reviews for young people who were in the Secure unit. Of the 26 reviews, 61% were recommended for progression, and all of the young people were placed in less restrictive units or back into the general population. As we've discussed in the past, since September 2017, the board has mandated that the department refrain from using restraint desks in the Secure unit school area. Per the board's variance condition, restraints should only be used only under extenuating and individualized circumstances, and DOC must notify the board on a weekly basis of their use in the unit. The department has provided these weekly reports to the board as required. The last documented use of restraint desks during school in Secure was September 14th, 2017. DOC's monthly audits of the Secure unit have also shown the following. From March to August, similar to the experience of young adults in ESH, young adults in Secure consistently spent less time out of cell than the minimum lockout. In Phase 1, where the department must offer 10 hours out of cell time, on average, young adults spent 7 hours and 29 minutes out of their cells. The law library coordinator was consistently in the Secure unit and spent, on average, 3 hours and 45 minutes each day in the unit, well beyond the requirement of 2 hours of law library each weekday. Recreation was also afforded every day that was audited. And in Secure, young adults were consistently participating in all the programming afforded to them. Similar to the audits in ESH, these show that DOC is making really important recommendations each month, and we look forward to hearing about the status of those recommendations and having discussions with the department about other ways to improve these audits. So we will now hear from the department about their request.
Good morning. Timothy Farrell, Senior Deputy Commissioner, Department of Correction. Pursuant to the 6-month limited variance renewal request for the Secure unit, referencing BOC minimum standards 1-05 and 1-08. Pursuant to Section 1-15 of the New York City Board of Corrections minimum standards, the New York City Department of Correction requests a 6-month limited variance renewal from BOC minimum standards 1-05 lock-in and 1-08 access to courts and legal services for the purposes of maintaining the use of the Secure unit. The department seeks that this variance take effect on November 23rd, 2018, the date upon which the underlying variance is set to expire. I have Assistant Commissioner Torres and Deputy Commissioner Tausek here to answer any questions relevant to the Secure unit.
Just a couple of questions. What's the maximum capacity of Secure?
Our beds of standard, we have seating for 8 per cube, but 8 is a rather...
Right, it would be a large number
yes.
for those quads,
so
which are really tiny.
we drop it down to, I think, 4 per cube.
Okay. So why, the census is low and has kind of remained low since we authorized enhanced supervision. We noticed enhanced supervision's gone up and Secure has gone down. Why is the census so low, since it seems to be a pretty successful program?
Well, it's... You want to talk about it?
Like Deputy Commissioner Farrell indicated, the census is high, 32. However, ever since we rolled out the Secure unit, each of the quads, we've made it a priority to only keep 4 young adults in each of the quads because we need to add staffing, usually 2 uniformed staff members, and when programming is rolled over, we include 1 program counselor. So at times you may have about 7 individuals in a quad, and keep in mind, Judge Hamill, that there are no restraints in any of the quads. When it comes to the placements, having no restraints, as it's been common practice for secure, we need to make sure that those young adults, the 4 young adults that are going into that quad, could actually live safely in those quads. And so when we look at the placements, we take into account their previous history with one another, their SRG affiliation. We take into account what the primary and secondary reasons for placement in secure have been. And so when you take a look at a given quad, you may find 4. There are times in which we have had to place only 1 young adult in a quad, especially if the young adult transitions out of ESH level 2, which has been the case in the past. Just so that you know, in recent history, we've transferred 11 young adults from ESH into secure as phase downs, with the last one being transitioned last week.
Okay, so it sounds like you're kind of using this a little bit of a step down from level 2, is that right?
We have used it in the past as such.
So how does the department decide whether to place a young adult in secure versus enhanced supervision level 2 or 3? I understand level 1 because that's for an active stabbing or slashing, but what about for level 2 or 3?
When it comes to the placements, whether they are secure or ESH, there is a weekly meeting known as the high risk. Any of the youth that is going to be placed, whether it be secure or ESH, is thoroughly discussed. There are specific members of the agency as well as programming who are brought into the conversation, as well as health affairs, in order for us to be able to take a closer look at all of the particulars that would determine the placement, whether it be secure or ESH. Of course, there's always a very thorough conversation with the Bureau Chief of Security as well as the Chief of the Department.
From the materials provided to the board, that the young people in secure are progressing through the program more quickly and actually completing it, where that doesn't appear to be in the case in enhanced supervision. Have you done any analysis to ascertain why secure seems to be functioning better in terms of progression and completion of the program?
We have yet to turn around and do a very thorough evaluation. I'm certain that we will look into it. However, keep in mind, Judge Hamill, that we review the kids at least 28 days. Excuse me, the layout and the expectation is completely different. Once we do the first 28-day review, we shift programming for the kid, concentrating more so on anger management and violence interrupters. And so after that, we can look as to whether it's a 2-week period of time before the kid advances either to level or phase 2 or level or phase 3.
My last question has to do with, yeah, please do.
Deputy Commissioner Tauzik, once again, I think also you have to look at numbers. You have to look at the census. Even though we've dramatically reduced it in ESH, there's still a larger contingent in ESH than there is in secure. And also just the physical plan itself, it allows for that progression versus ESH, where we're seeing level 1 advances to level 2, and then due to the limited geography like SDC was speaking about, then we're confronted with those housing challenges. So it's a mixture of programmatic successes as well as just physical plan.
Young people are not getting the the board mandated minimum lockout, that the 10-hour lockout they're supposed to get in phase 1, they're just shy of 8 hours, and when they progress to 12 hours, then they're shy a couple more hours. It doesn't seem to matter which unit they're in. They don't seem to get the mandated lockout. Why is that insecure?
So I know for a fact that the kids at Secure are afforded their lockout times, whether it's the 10, the 12, or the 14 hours. Some of them opt not to come out for whatever the reasons might be.
So it's just that they're not coming out.
They
They're taking
choose not
less
to come
lockout
out.
time.
That is correct.
Okay.
And just so that you know, Judge Hamill, if I may, and I don't want to be redundant, however, in looking as to how best to maximize programming at Secure, we just modified the tour of the program counselors, and so we're bringing the program counselors much earlier, at least an hour earlier, to have more interaction with the young adults at Secure.
Yeah, and then our board information is consistent, I guess, with the Nunez report, is that the young adults here aren't getting the 3 hours of education they're entitled to.
They are afforded the 3 hours of education,
Except they weren't.
5 days a week.
Pardon?
They are afforded the 3 hours of education, 5
Oh, the
days a
Hanbury.
week
I'm
by
sorry,
the Department of Education.
And that was the Hanbury report, actually. Well, this is the board report is that they're not getting, they're not having access to 3 hours of school, which is consistent with Hanbury report.
Last year, there was a complaint that we immediately addressed, and we made sure that the entire supervisory staff assigned to Secure was allowing the population access to educational services for the 3 mandated hours under Hanbury.
Okay, thank you.
And the board's report, the board staff report on that was from 6 months ago.
So maybe more current information is that they are getting
Why are-
access to 3 hours?
Yes.
So this is old information.
What?
Do we have information that it's more, that it's up to 3 hours now?
No, because we haven't looked at it
We
since.
haven't looked at it.
So part of the importance of the new condition on both of these variances, it's the addition of monitoring, specifically this issue in great detail. So once we have that information, I think that would be the appropriate time for staff to look in depth at the issue again.
I was just looking at, it would be good to have a picture of Secure here for those of you who haven't seen it, because, I mean, this is not a unit that's ever had 32 people in it. This is not a unit that has 12 people in it. This is a unit which has 4 or 5 or 6 people in it, in 4 large cages. I think that programmatically it is a very important unit and it should be expanded. You don't expand it, you limit it to, so that basically every person spends their day in a cage by themselves, because that's how you set it up. Sometimes there are 2. If there are 6, there'll be 2 people in 2 cages and 1 in the other 2. And I understand that's the way, and you think that it works that way. That's why structurally you are not providing the education, because each person individually goes into the schoolroom in the 4 different areas, the 4 different cages. So you don't have 12 hours a day to do the school, nor do you have teaching available that day. That's why structurally you have this education problem. I hope you deal with it, and we'll be looking at it. I do think that you should expand Secure. That programmatically you've dedicated a lot to it, which has been very successful. You're getting everybody through this program, quite effectively, and you're not saying that these people then go off to create giant problems other places. They spend 90 days in there just like you planned it to be, and there are lots of people there, lots of staff, lots of program staff. So it's a very good program which should be expanded. Architecturally, it couldn't be worse. So I look forward to, you using, you could take one of these units in ESH and make it into a secure unit where you'd have a lot more space and you could do it right. So I just the Education Hub is of great importance to me and to the board here, and I wish you would as part of our discussions consider the expansion of Secure with the appropriate architectural models, because it's such a terrific program in terms of dealing with and the entrance criteria for Secure, based upon my review of all the people who've gone into it, is people generally slashings and stabbings. That's why people end up in Secure as well. So it's a very similar population to ESH1. Thank you.
And I would like to just understand who makes the decision, just from an operational perspective, who makes the decision, ESH level 2 versus Secure? And let me ask you why I want to understand it, because I agree. If there was a way, if there's a decision point that there is a choice between whoever's making a decision about level 2 versus secure, with the kind of what we're seeing with secure in terms of the progression, the way the program is operated. It makes so much more sense that if there's a choice between ESH2 and secure, put people in secure. The program is working, it's set up, and then you use your EHS level 2 to move those who got their review on level 1 and ready to move to level 2, move them into level 2. So you create capacity by using the capacity you already have. So I want to understand the decision point.
The decision for security comes out of the Bureau Chief of Security's office after a review through the High-Risk Review Committee.
So the review committee makes a recommendation?
And then it gets forwarded through to the Bureau Chief of Security's office for final.
So the bureau chief basically approves it, but the recommendation is most often followed, or is it overridden by the bureau chief?
I would say it's followed for the most part, because it is there are representatives from the Bureau Chief of Security's office on that high-risk review committee. So there is direct input from the uniform custody staff, security staff, and the programming staff, as well as the facility who's recommending the young adult to go in. So there's a lot of different people there to voice their opinions and their objectivity on the circumstances for the placement.
Okay. At some point, and maybe not now, but I'd like to talk to you maybe offline about looking at that information over the last 6 months. Out of all the incidents that happened, or maybe the last 3 months, out of all the incidents that happened, what decision was made by this program committee or by this committee that either recommended ESH level 2 or secure? Just want to understand it, because I think there's an opportunity there.
Plus, there's an 18-year-old factor also in that, right, Tim? I mean, there's an 18-year-old factor in there, too. You can't mix 18 years old with the rest of the population, so they would most likely go and secure if it was problematic.
It is an additional option for our 18-year-old population that doesn't meet the criteria for a level 1 or level 2 ESH right off the bat. It gives us that flexibility.
Right, but if a person is 18 years old, we wouldn't want to put them in ESH because we co-make. We try to keep that separate, right now.
Yes, it's the incident, the trigger incident that doesn't warrant the ESH pursuant to our directive and the BOC standards. That secure unit gives us that option to manage that particular individual.
Any other thoughts, comments from the board? Martha, do you want to read something?
So we'll move on to the conditions, almost all of which are existing conditions with one addition that I will point out. 1, restraints, including restraint desks, shall not be used except to control an incarcerated person who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage, for healthcare purposes, or when necessary as a security precaution during transfer or transport. When restraints are necessary, the department shall use the least restrictive forms of restraints that are appropriate and should use them only as long as the need exists, not for a predetermined amount of time. The department shall not use restraint desks in secure units except in the secure unit school area and only when A, extenuating safety or security circumstances or specific credible intelligence of a safety or security threat require their use, and B, the deputy warden of secure approves their use in writing. The department shall provide written notice to the board on a weekly basis stating whether restraint desks were used and specifying the circumstances that required their use. 3, the department will make every effort to A, increase the number of staff present and supervising young adults during secure unit school sessions, and B, keep the number of students to a safely manageable number without restraint desks by adding multiple school sessions if necessary. 4, the department shall not use 3 or more point restraints in secure units. 5, the department shall A, provide all young adults housed in secure units with a minimum out of cell time of 10 hours per day, except for instances of de-escalation as set forth in the department's written directive concerning secure units. B, provide all young adults with due process in connection with their placement in secure units. And C, exclude all young adults with serious mental or serious physical disabilities or conditions from placement in secure units. 6, the department shall notify the board in writing every time the lockout period in secure units does not start at 5 a.m. and the reasons therefor. The department shall provide written notice to the board within 24 hours of such occurrence. 7, during the pendency of this variance, if the young adult in a secure unit has not committed an infraction within the preceding 28 days, the young adult will advance to a less restrictive level or unit unless, 1, he has engaged in disruptive, violent, or aggressive behavior while in secure unit level 1, and/or 2, there is credible intelligence that he may engage in additional violence in a less restrictive unit. 8, where the department is permitted to consider a young adult's activity occurring or actions committed prior to the incident, such activity or actions must have occurred within the preceding year. 9, and here's where the same addition to the ESH conditions appears here. 9, the department shall conduct and report on a monthly audit of its compliance with BOC minimum standards and education services. A 105B lock-in, B 108F access to courts and legal services, including law library, C 106 recreation, D 102C2 classification, and E education services, specifically the number of young adults DOC brought to school, and for each young adult, the time DOC brought him to school and the time DOC took him out of school. The department shall provide its monthly audit report to the board by the 10th business day of the following month. 10, the department shall provide the board with a public report on the implementation of the foregoing conditions. The requirements for this report are outlined in a document titled ESH and Secure Unit Variances, Public Reporting Condition, dated November 13th, 2018, and available on the board's website. 11, on at least a monthly basis, the department shall provide the board access to all documentation considered in each secure placement and review decision. This includes, but is not limited to, all records reviewed or created by Secure Unit Adjudication, Health and Hospitals Placement Review, the Chief's Reviews, and the Secure Unit Support Team. On a monthly basis, the department shall transmit to the board a list of all secure placements and reviews. The department shall provide this documentation for each month by the 10th business day of the following month, except documentation for the month this variance expires shall be provided by the 5th business day of the following month.
Department, want to comment? Have any comments or questions on? Good. Okay, if there are questions or comments at the board level, otherwise we can take a vote on this. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Jones-Austin? Yes. Yep, and I vote yes. Thank you. The motion carries. I believe the last thing we have is the public...
Was that the motion on the conditions?
That was a motion on the conditions.
So with the variance.
Oh, so now we vote for the variance.
With the conditions.
Okay, so now we vote for the variance with the conditions. Ms. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, parliamentarian here. Thank you. Okay, so now we go to the regular public comment period. We have 7 people who are going to comment. The first is Kenneth Harrison.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Officer Harrison at MDC. I just would like to know what is the board's... Thank you, sir. I'd like to know what is the board's stance with regards to inmates who have been recently bailed out of prison with the John F. Kennedy Charity Group who have been assaulted to officers, but they still get bailed out and then they choose not to return to court. I've sat up here and I listened to everyone and I say thank you for that. Thank you for my supportive staff of my chief, my fellow workers that work with alongside me. I just want to know, what are we doing? What is the board's position to help us do our job much more safely and effectively for the safety of our officers, other staff, and inmates? That's my concern. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Next speaker is Elizabeth Bender.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Bender. I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society's Decarceration Project. I want to thank the board for putting bail on its agenda today, and I look forward to working with the board to improve that bail system. Last summer, as you noted, the City Council passed a package of laws that were designed to make paying bail easier and more efficient, to help make sure that presumptively innocent New Yorkers are not held in jail when they should be free on bail. As we learned today when the department spoke about those laws, the status is largely non-compliant. We submitted written materials to the board in advance of today's meeting, and in those written materials we have months of data showing that there has been widespread non-compliance with all three of the laws that apply to the department. That compliance that we have seen appears to be coincidental rather than intentional. I want to focus my short time today on Local Law 123, which imposed the common sense requirement that people who've posted their bail should be released in a timely way. Last week, I spoke to a client that I'll call Derek. Derek had his bail set at arraignment in night court and was taken to jail in the middle of the night. Before leaving court, he was able to contact his family on the phone, and they told him that they would post his bail first thing the next morning. When he got to jail, he was put into an intake cell where he was ultimately held for 16 hours with about a dozen other people. Meanwhile, around the time he was in that cell, his family did post his bail. But instead of being processed for release, Derek was transferred to a housing unit. He spent that afternoon, that night, the following morning, and the afternoon after that in a housing unit, after his family had posted his bail. Finally, a day after his family posted his bail, a correction officer came and called 3 names for bail call. One of those names was Derek's. He was taken to another area of the jail and spent 3 hours in a cell waiting for his bail paperwork to be approved. That 3-hour period feels even more significant today after we heard from the department that after 2 hours, an automatic email is sent reminding staff that someone needs to be processed out. I myself called the DOC facility the morning after Derek's family posted his bail. I was told they had his paperwork and he would be released that morning. He was not released for another 6 hours. Ultimately, Derek spent a total of 27 hours in custody after his bail was posted. In that over a day, he missed a medical appointment where he was getting treatment for a car accident he had recently suffered, and his mother was understandably stuck at home, worried sick. This is not just an example of the department violating city law. It's an example of pervasive, willful delay and negligence. And I know that because, unfortunately, stories like Derek's are commonplace. What struck me in talking to him was that he seemed to know that too. That losing more than a day of his freedom because of inexcusable illegal delay didn't seem to ruffle him all that much. He seemed to look at it as par for the course. These laws don't fix the departmental culture that allows delays like this to become par for the course, but they set bright-line rules that this board should hold the department accountable for following. The board should demand that the department publish every report that they mention here today, especially those disciplinary reports for officers who cause illegal delays, like the one that stole a day of Derek's life. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elena Weissman.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to submit this. My name is Elena Weissman, and I'm the director of the Bronx Freedom Fund. We're a community bail fund that since 2007 has secured the freedom of thousands of New Yorkers who would otherwise be incarcerated for their poverty on bail. Since January, we've been using public data and client interviews to monitor the implementation of the laws my colleague Elizabeth just spoke about. Unfortunately, stories like the one she shared are commonplace. I'm going to give a brief overview of the data we found over the last year demonstrating the noncompliance. The first law, passed 124, gave sureties more time to get to court to bail out their loved ones, changing the hold period from 2 hours to 4 to 12 hours to avoid and helping avoid people spending the night in jail when someone was coming to bail them out. However, we see the department regularly violating the 2-hour holds, much less extending them to 12 hours, and have documented at least a dozen violations in the last few months, all occurring at exactly the same time, when DOC employees put our clients on a daily 1 p.m. bus to jail. despite our holds, and are showing up to pay bail immediately. These clients can't be bailed out for at least another 24 hours because DOC tells us they are in transit. They spend a day and night in jail because they happen to have bail set at a time the officers considered inconvenient. A few weeks later, another Law 123 took effect, requiring DOC to accept bail payment at all hours and to process payments at or near courthouses rather than solely at jails. As we just heard, the closest payment location in the Bronx is not at the courthouse, but rather at the Vernon C. Bain Center, or the Boat, which is 3 miles away from the courthouse and usually an hour bus ride. Only a small percentage of people qualify for online bail, and there's a significant fee associated with it. So our staff consistently spends hours waiting for DOC to accept payment at the Boat and can attest to the fact that payment is not accepted immediately nor continuously. It can take anywhere from an hour to 20 hours for DOC to accept a cash bail payment, and we are paid professionals who know how to navigate the process. New Yorkers are waiting days to bring their legally innocent loved ones home, sometimes even days after they were turned away from paying at arraignments. In Queens, DOC actually began accepting payment adjacent to the courthouse last month. Payment can be submitted immediately after arraignments, leading to holds being honored despite the 1 p.m. lunchtime bus, and saving clients at least a night and day in jail. We've also had success posting for incarcerated individuals at this facility around the clock. We know that an alternative does exist because we see it happening in Queens. The same Law 123 also mandated that DOC release people from jail within a certain time frame after bail payment, beginning with 5 hours last October, 4 hours in January, and 3 hours this October. Under the current 3-hour release limit, the average release time that we've documented is 13 hours. 75 people were released over 10 hours after we paid bail, and 25 20 hours later. Only 24% of our clients were released within the mandated 4 hours. Our clients' jobs, homes, and families are at stake during these legally avoidable jail stays. Stories like the one Elizabeth shared are so common and the stakes so high. In January, another Law 125 took effect, requiring DOC to facilitate bail payment by connecting individuals with bail facilitators within 48 hours of being booked into the jail, helping them identify potential sureties, and assisting in self-payment for those with cash or debit cards in their property. As we just heard, there have been no bail facilitators in operation. We get referrals every day to pay $1 bail for people across all facilities, often multiple times per day, who have been in on that dollar for days without an opportunity to self-pay. 11 months after the law took effect and 16 months after DOC was put on notice to make this change, we've seen essentially no effect. These are laws that correct for an unnecessary problem. There's no reason for DOC to be keeping people in jail if they can pay bail or if they've done it already. City Council has passed the laws, and we now call on the department to implement them. We urge the board to read our written testimony for a fuller report and to take this legal and moral mandate seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Elias Hussamadeen. Three more.
Good morning.
Morning.
Every time I come here, I feel like a kid in a candy store. It's just so much to choose from, so many things to talk about. But I'm gonna try to stay focused. About 6 months ago, maybe a little longer, I wrote a letter to Commissioner Brand concerning inmates being housed according to their SRG or gang affiliation. And specifically in AMKC, and she wrote me a letter back basically saying that I was wrong and that my facts were inaccurate. So Wednesday of last week, I decided again to go to AMKC, dress roll call. Pretty big roll call, 3 to 11, maybe about 100 and something correction officers. After roll call, I got them in a huddle and started talking to them because that's what I do, to see what their concerns are, what their interests are. And they had quite a few concerns, but one of their main concerns was inmates being housed according to their SRG or gang affiliation. I decided to visit Quad 10 Upper in AMKC. And of course, Quad 10 Upper is a gang house. When I asked my officer what type of inmate you have here, she mistakenly thought I was talking about gang affiliation when I was actually talking about their classification, but she said it's a blood house. And we toured and we looked. The department is either housing inmates according to their SRG status or they're not. Now, according to the commissioner, they're not. And I'm here basically because I don't want to be a smartass, but sometimes it's hard in this position not to be. It's clear who run the jails. That's the Board of Corrections. You guys really run the jails. Not too long ago, Judge Hamill, it was pretty much your idea to house 18 to 21 years old together in one building, and we pretty much see how that went. So it's obvious to me who the commissioner listens to. And I am asking this board to request. I want you to ask the commissioner, do they house inmates according to their SRG status, or don't they? And the problem is when inmates are housed according to their gang affiliation, it takes away the control, any type of control that correction officers, correction captains, or any rank can think about having inside a facility. And we want and are looking and demanding that this practice, if they're doing it, cease. And if they're not doing it, how is it possible that they're not doing it when AMKC, the Tombs, MDC, I can take all of you or 9 of you over there right now, and we could go to whatever house, we could just pick one, and I can guarantee you that the predominant number of inmates in that housing area will belong to one particular gang or one particular sect. Quad 10 Up in AMKC was blood and all of the sub-chapters and sub-whatever. And the problem is that by doing this, they're not only giving gangs control of the jail, they're actually creating gangs. They're actually creating gangs. Correction officers, the Department of Corrections, and I'll be, just give me one more minute. The Department of Corrections deals with care, custody, and control. We know that with care, we share that with the health and hospital and this group and that agency and this agency. When it comes to custody, we're good. But when it comes to control, the agency, over the years or more, because of the way they classify and house inmates, have systematically removed control, any type of control. An officer can't expect 50 bloods, can't expect to tell 50 bloods. They're going to listen to the leader of their group, the leader of their gang, much quicker than they're going to obey or listen to a correction officer. So, again, without belaboring the issue, I would like for you to have this agency answer. How do they house, how do they classify inmates? Are they housed according to their gang affiliation? And if they say they're not, then why are all of the housing areas filled with gangs? And if they say they are, then they're responsible for a lot of the officers and inmates and civilians who've been assaulted, attacked, beat, rape, whatever it is that you want to call it. So, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, I read your letter
As soon as you wrote it about AMKC, and I went to AMKC the next week, and I spoke with the senior deputy wardens in the facility who completely confirmed what you're saying. I agree with you completely on it. I've talked to multiple senior members of the staff in public meetings, in lots of meetings. I raise it here. I recently spoke. We may disagree on this part of it. The department set up a SRG unit in Horizon, A-Hall, and they said they've now taken it down. I don't know that they have. I haven't had a chance to check, but
I would need another 3 minutes because I'm at Horizon.
No, but I just want to say,
I'm at Horizon
the board has regularly discussed this with it. I think it's very important, and I will, and we will review it. We've actually have, I believe, a project being conducted right now, which should be reporting when. by the next meeting, because we are concerned about it, and we will have it on the agenda at the next meeting. I agree with you. This is a serious problem. And it creates danger for your staff and everybody else in the facilities.
And it's definitely happening.
It's definitely happening. I agree it's happening.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
I have a question for them to check it out also, because in office is also the issue. And
I can tell you what you said is 100% correct. I've been in an issue where I had to split up a house because I was actually in danger as a warden. I felt threatened. So what you're saying, it's 100% correct.
You know, I just want to add to it. I know I've always asked the commissioners, and I'm always told that they don't house it. And then I know when we've asked security, they say, well, they try to balance. And but yet, notwithstanding that, when you go to the housing units, you often find that they are all Bloods or all Crips. So it is a significant issue that we have been trying to address, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Out of the 343 incidents that's taken place at Horizon since it opened, they're all gang members. They're either Bloods, Crips, Trinitarians, whatever their name is that particular week. But the 16 and 17-year-olds assigned to Horizon are definitely gang members. And quite frankly, the assaults against the officers, the assaults against inmates and staff alike, is done by them. And quite frankly, the agency doesn't even have a remedy as to what they're going to do with these gang members when they commit these crimes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Al Craig.
Actually, I came to talk basically about the same thing, but from a different perspective. Like I said before, it might take me a long time to understand, because I thought everybody here was really for the best interest of the inmate and the officers, that the people who actually work on Rikers Island or in these jails. But I find out that's not true, right? There's something bigger happening here. I believe, and I'm going to set out to prove it, right? And that's with the city council, that's with you guys. Well, I don't know if you're going to listen, because I've been talking about the same thing for 3 years, and that's safety. But the city council, I'm going to petition the newly sworn, when she sworn, Letitia James. I'm going to, the DOI inspector. I believe that this is a criminal act, and if not, it's definitely a situation to where it's definitely a violation of their own rules in terms of housing them according to gang affiliation, right? We're going to sue. We're going to do everything we can to expose this nonsense, right? I believe the person that's in charge of classification is also in charge of closing Rikers Island. I believe to house them with some mindset that if you put them all together, that it's going to, the violence would have a downturn. It has not happened. You know, when you think about drugs being introduced into the environment, these gangs are now become emboldened. And they don't have a policy. They don't address anything. Since they've been in power, there hasn't been very little, if any, sanctions imposed on anything. Just recently on the news, it showed an inmate visitor going into a child's diaper to receive contraband. You know, we are getting, like, can we please, I mean, I know it's important about a secure desk and all of this, but if you don't do it, I'm going to call for all of you to be removed from this thing. I'm going to demand that. Everybody's going to know. I don't care if I got to do an ad around the country, because you people have not addressed security and safety. All you keep doing is talking about the inmate who commit the crime and how he should feel. I think it's totally disingenuous. I thought that some of you had some sense of morals, but But you don't. This is the Mayor de Blasio move. Less restrictive facilities. And in turn, they have not let the uniformed staff that work in the Department of Correction do their job. And these people work these same housing areas, they work these jails, and they've been denied to do their jobs by a lot of these civilian cats over here who don't know what they're doing, whose sole goal is to close Rikers Island. And like the president has said before, if you close it out, we still gonna have jobs. The reality is you've done nothing to address safety. Shame on all of you, and the use of that young man that got killed, Trayvon Martin, was totally ridiculous. But getting back to them, they are negligent, at the very least, to a lot of people getting hurt by housing them according to gang affiliation. And like I said last month, they have created so many different gangs because of it. Inmates are now placed in a position that they either have to get down with these gangs or create their own gang or give in to these gangs. And they know it, they're not doing anything, and they're not letting the people in the uniformed staff, neither are you, by the way, letting the people in the uniformed staff do their damn job. And I wish, I'm gonna look at you, the uniformed staff, I wish you would just tell them you're gonna take me to court. A lot of this nonsense that these people are doing to us, and I say us, because after they remove you, there's going to be somebody else in a suit and tie that's running this department, and they're going to continue to allow us to get assaulted, continue to allow inmates. And any of you advocates who got any cojones, what you need to do is start suing, because this is criminal. This is criminal when they housing people, throwing inmates into housing areas with 10, 15 guys who are all a part of the same set, and then you need to investigate how many of them have been cut. I'm sorry if I'm taking a little time, but people are getting hurt. And if you don't like it, shame on you. Get up here and talk about that.
Mr. Craig. The next speaker is Emily Dindell. Say that right? Close.
Good morning. I'm Emily Dindyle. I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition. On behalf of the Jails Action Coalition, Anthony Posada from Legal Aid Society, and activist Ananya Kumar Banerjee, we appreciate the opportunity to submit testimony to the board regarding voting rights for people in New York City jails. New Yorkers who go through the criminal legal system are too often disenfranchised, either by law or by practice, and we ask the board to take steps to ensure that all eligible voters in New York City are free to exercise their right to vote to the fullest extent in future federal, state, local, and special elections. New York state law categorically prohibits people who are incarcerated for felony convictions from voting, but people who are incarcerated pre-trial or for misdemeanor convictions retain the right to vote. So that's a significant portion of the New York City jail population. Over the last several months, Legal Aid Society has registered hundreds of voters on Rikers Island, but a volunteer-led registration drive is just one step towards full enfranchisement. For New Yorkers to exercise their constitutional right to vote to the fullest extent, they must have the opportunity to cast their ballots in an environment that is consistent with the gravity and dignity of the franchise. New York voters who are not detained have the choice of voting in their local poll site or by absentee ballot under conditions that work for their personal circumstances. New York voters who are in custody have no such choice. They're required to vote by absentee ballot. And voting by absentee ballot in jails present unique challenges and privacy concerns that could deter eligible voters from exercising their right to vote. Creating a system that delivers ballots to detainees promptly and allows them to cast their ballots with privacy and security is critical to preventing further disenfranchisement and disengagement. While there have been initiatives to help deliver absentee ballots to these voters, those initiatives have relied heavily on external volunteer engagement. The effort to enfranchise New York detained voters in New York City jails should not fall on shoulders of civilian volunteers. Rather, the city should develop and implement proper protections and protocols. We urge the board to take steps to maximize voter engagement in New York City jails by establishing a citywide policy for facilitating absentee voting in New York City jails for future federal, state, local, and special elections. That policy should include processes for voter registration and education, distribution of absentee ballots, completion of absentee ballots to the standard of privacy available at poll sites, secure collection of ballots and their timely submission to the Board of Elections, and a mechanism for voters to know whether their absentee ballot was received and counted. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. We hope the board will do what it can to prioritize this issue and ensure ballot access for eligible voters in New York City jails.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last speaker is Kayla Simpson.
Good morning. My name is Kayla Simpson. Sorry, pardon me. I'm a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society's Prisoners' Rights Project. I think I addressed you last month. Thank you for having me again. I just have two very brief points. First, as to the young adult ESH, we at Legal Aid echo the board's concerns expressed here about ESH. Generally, we support Dr. Cohen's proposed condition to eliminate the use of restraint desks for young adults. But today we heard the department express concerns that eliminating restraint desks could jeopardize compliance with the Nunez consent judgment. I am co-counsel in Nunez, so I wanted to address that very briefly. While we are aware that the department invokes Nunez when it is convenient for them to do so, they do not always do so accurately. As counsel for Nunez plaint class at Prisoners' Rights Project, we can assure you that Nunez does not require the use of restraint desks for young adults. So I just wanted to make that point. Secondly, just a brief comment as to PREA. If I understood the chairman correctly, the department has not submitted a corrective action plan by the November 8th deadline. Is that correct? Okay. We just wanted to say that we're very deeply concerned about that. The board audit of the PREA closing reports revealed, we think, very troubling systemic deficiencies, which I think motivated the board's October resolution. And in light of how serious the non-compliance is, we are very troubled that the department has not taken even the first step to even have a plan submitted by the deadline or any additional information, much less executing that plan in a meaningful way. So we certainly ask that the board continue to monitor the department very closely in the situation and, if necessary, issue notices of violation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment. We do not have a December meeting. We meet back here January 8th, 2019 for the next meeting of the Board of Correction. Thank you, everyone. Have a good holiday.